My name is Natawut. I'm 80 years old, and I want to begin with something I understood only after many decades of getting it wrong. The morning is not simply the beginning of the day. It is a decision about what kind of person you will be for the next 12 hours. Not in a dramatic sense, not in a way that requires great ceremony or extraordinary commitment, but in the quiet, practical sense that the first moments of consciousness, the first movements of the mind, the first quality of attention you bring to waking life, set a tone that tends to persist. I did not always understand this. For many years I treated the morning as something to get through on the way to what actually mattered. I woke, I moved, I began, and I brought into each day all the unconsidered habits of my inner life, without pausing to choose anything consciously. The result was that I lived mostly on automatic, mostly reactive, mostly carrying forward the same inner conditions that had shaped the day before. And I called that living, when in truth it was more like continuing. Maybe you recognize something similar in yourself. Maybe your mornings begin before you have chosen how they begin. Maybe the first thoughts that arrive are already familiar and already heavy. Maybe you have spent years moving through your days without ever quite feeling that you are moving through them intentionally. If any of that is true, stay with me, because what I am about to share is not a system of morning productivity or spiritual performance. It is 7 simple acts that, when practiced with genuine attention, gradually change the quality of the person who arrives into each day. I was born in northern Thailand, in a world where mornings began with necessity. You woke because the light came and the work waited. There was no concept of conscious morning ritual in the sense I later came to understand. You rose, you began. The inner life was not something that received time and care before the outer life made its demands. I carried this way of beginning into the monastery with me, and for longer than I would like to admit, even within the structure of monastic life, I was still simply executing the forms of morning practice without truly inhabiting them. Going through the motions of ritual without bringing the quality of mind that ritual is designed to cultivate. And the difference I eventually discovered is everything. The first ritual that genuinely changed my mornings was the practice of brief stillness before movement. Not meditation in the formal sense, not sitting for 40 minutes or achieving any particular state. Simply remaining still for a few breaths after waking, before the body rises, before the mind begins its daily project of construction and commentary. In those few breaths, there is sometimes a quality of awareness that has not yet been claimed by the demands of the day. A quiet openness. A moment before the identity of yesterday has fully reassembled itself. Most people never notice this window because they move through it too quickly. I spent years moving through it without knowing it existed. Learning to pause in it, even briefly, even imperfectly, begins to establish a relationship with something in you that exists before all the noise begins. The second ritual was what I came to think of as honest greeting. Not a formal prayer necessarily, not a recitation, but a genuine moment of acknowledging where I actually was on that particular morning. Not where I wanted to be, not where I thought I should be, but where I honestly was. Some mornings that meant acknowledging that I was tired. Some mornings it meant acknowledging that I was anxious about something I had been carrying. Some mornings it meant sitting with the particular heaviness of grief or uncertainty that had been present for days. The honest greeting sounds simple. What it actually requires is the willingness to not pretend. And that willingness, practiced daily, builds a relationship with yourself that makes wisdom possible. Because wisdom begins with honesty about what is actually here. The third ritual was loving kindness, but not the version that asks you to feel something you do not feel. The version that asks you simply to direct attention toward the wish that beings not suffer. Beginning with yourself, then extending to those close to you, then further. This practice does not require feeling, it requires direction. And over time, the direction itself begins to cultivate something, a softening, an orientation toward the world that is slightly less defended, slightly more open, slightly more capable of genuine compassion when compassion is called for during the day. I found that mornings where I practiced even 5 minutes of this changed the texture of my interactions in ways that were not dramatic but were consistent. The fourth ritual was 1 minute of genuine gratitude. Not a list, not performance. 1 minute of actually noticing something that is present and intact and available. The quality of light, the fact of breath, a person who exists somewhere in the world and whom you love. The capacity of the mind to know where it is. Gratitude practiced in this way, specifically and honestly, rather than generally and routinely, begins to wire the mind toward noticing what is present rather than what is absent. And a mind that notices what is present faces the difficulties of the day with a different foundation than a mind that begins in scarcity. The fifth ritual was setting one conscious intention. Not a goal for productivity, not a resolution about behavior. One inner intention for how you want to meet what comes. Something like, today I will try to respond to difficulty before I have decided what it means. Or today I will bring genuine attention to one conversation rather than managed presence to many. Or today I will notice when I am adding unnecessary suffering to what is already hard. These intentions are not promises of perfection. They are orientations. They give the mind a direction before the day provides the content. And that small gift of direction, practiced daily, gradually shapes the person who faces the end of the day having actually tried to live in a particular way. The sixth ritual was brief contemplation of impermanence, not as a morbid thought, as a clarifying one. Remembering in the morning that everything I will encounter today, including the difficulties, including the pleasures, including the people I love and the situations that frustrate me, is temporary, shifts the relationship to all of it. It is harder to spend the day clinging desperately to what is good when you remember it will change. It is harder to be completely consumed by what is difficult when you remember it will also change. Impermanence does not diminish life. When genuinely understood, it deepens it, because it reminds you that what is here now is available now, and that now is always the only time it has ever been possible to live. The seventh ritual was the simplest and often the most neglected. It was stepping outside or near a window and taking several conscious breaths of real air before beginning anything that required the mind to function. The natural world regulates something in the nervous system that no amount of inner work fully replaces. There is something in the contact with sky, with air, with the evidence of a world that exists beyond the thoughts currently occupying your head, that restores proportion, that reminds you, without words, that you are inside a life rather than inside a problem. I found that mornings where I skipped this felt measurably different from mornings where I did not dramatically, but consistently. The day had a different quality of spaciousness when it had begun with that contact. What most people don't realize is that these rituals do not work through the content of what they contain. They work through the quality of attention they train. The point of pausing before rising is not the pause itself. It is the practice of choosing how you begin before life makes the choice for you. The point of loving kindness is not the specific phrases. It is the practice of deliberately orienting the mind toward care rather than defense. The point of impermanence contemplation is not the thought itself. It is the practice of holding what is temporary lightly enough to actually inhabit it fully. There was a long period in my practice when I understood all of this intellectually and still did not live it consistently. I would practice for a while, notice the difference, let it slip, notice the difference again. What finally changed was not a greater understanding. It was the simple decision to make these practices non-negotiable. Not because I always felt inspired, because I had seen enough times that the days when I practiced them were consistently different from the days when I did not. Not perfect, not without difficulty, but different in a way that mattered. The mind was more spacious. The reactions were slightly less automatic. The day felt less like something happening to me and more like something I was actually inside of. At 80 years old, I can tell you that what these rituals have given me is not dramatic transformation. They have given me a slightly different relationship to each morning. A relationship where I arrive into the day having chosen something rather than having simply continued from where I left off. And over years, that small difference in how each day begins has become one of the most significant differences in how my life has felt to live. Not because the rituals are magic, because the quality of attention you practice first thing in the morning has a way of persisting, imperfectly but genuinely, through the hours that follow. If these words are landing somewhere real in you today, maybe this is the right moment to consider not what you want to add to your morning, but what quality of attention you want to bring to it. Which of these 7 practices speaks most directly to what your mornings currently lack? Tell me in the comments, and if this message gave you something you can actually use, stay close to this space, because the morning is where it all begins, and what you do with it, practiced with genuine attention over time, shapes more than just the day.